Before the break, we saw Ross Becker's full piece about Albert Lea, talking about the economy there. I wanted to bring Ross in to go into more of this conversation because, Ross, as we know, when it comes to putting together stories, we use sound bites, and there's always more behind it, and I wanted to get more of that. So there were other things that you heard when you were in Albert Lea.
Yeah, there were a lot of other things we heard. The number one thing, obviously, is that people there were excited about the fact that they did survive. One of the reasons we chose Albert Lea is because if 5 businesses go out of business in Rochester, they can be replaced. There are chains that might come in and so on. But if 5 businesses on Broadway in Albert Lea go out of business, that is a major hit for the economy there. So it was critical that these businesses stay open in Albert Lea. And so we wanted to take a look at a community like Albert Lea, where it is so important to keep every door open, to keep every cash register ringing, and how they went about doing that, how they went about putting the tools, again, in the toolbox to help fix that problem in Albert Lea.
Yeah, and there's some irony behind what they say they were able to do that others, or they accuse others of not doing.
Well, the redevelopment agency there, the first thing that Philip Johnson did is listen. He did 2 surveys in that community, and in fact, he's going to do a third, where he asked the businesses what they need in the next 3 months to stay open. What do you want us to do? How do you want us to help you? And then they went about putting the pieces together to do that. The irony is that's exactly what many people in Albert Lea are saying the state of Minnesota did not do. They didn't listen. They simply imposed the same kind of rules that they imposed on Minneapolis, on St. Paul, on other Mankato, other big cities in the state. They imposed those same rules on Albert Lea. And the people in Albert Lea, and many of I talked to, said that was unfair. They should have asked us how we can best keep ourselves safe during a pandemic and keep our businesses open. And they say they never asked.
And that's the other thing, too. When we talk about education and how school districts were being given the authority to lead their districts, because what happens in Hayfield, for example, is not even close to what happens in Minneapolis or in Rochester. And, you know, so I get all of that, but the thing is that the state comes out with these mandates. It's for public safety, so the lockdowns happen. It's amazing that so many of the businesses in such a small town were able to make it.
They say there that they don't want to get their people sick. I mean, these are neighbors. They don't want to get their neighbors sick. So the stores, for instance, along Broadway or in some of the strip centers, they said we had plans in place. We were able to stay open. We made sure that our neighbors stayed away from our neighbors to make sure they didn't get sick. The state, they said, never took that into consideration. They just shut us down. But, and this is, you've heard this over and over again, they left Walmart open in Albert Lea. And that is the part that, again, just eats at those people over and over again. And that's why the redevelopment agency said, we want to listen to these businesses. We want to know what they need to stay open. And then they provided that for them. And that's why Albert Lea right now is in a much better situation than some other smaller towns in the state of Minnesota.
Ross, did you get into politics at all? Because you can't have these kinds of conversations without the politics coming in.
Well, you know, it's funny because you're right. Normally that would be the case. But in all my discussions, politics never came up. For them, this is not a political issue. They don't want to argue Democrat, Republican. They don't want to argue conservative, liberal. They want to argue we have a community that we want to remain viable and vibrant, and we know how to do that. Let us do that. It didn't matter who was on the other side of the political spectrum.
Okay, and well, when we do talk politics, who was it in your story? Rich Murray.
Rich Murray from the city council.
Yeah, and he said, why aren't our lawmakers shouting from the rooftop? So I took this to their lawmaker, Peggy Bennett, who is the representative from Albert Lea. After the break, we're going to hear from her when I asked her that question. Thanks, Ross.
You're welcome.